Welcome back to One on One, New York's longest running sports call-in show. I'm Sam Davis with Dylan Balsamo. Pleased to be joined by Brandon Scoopy Robinson, new NBA analyst at Bally Sports. Brandon, thank you so much for taking the time today to be with us.
Gentlemen, thank you. I couldn't think of any place else that I would be today. So thank you for gracing me with your presence.
That's so kind of you. Very, very appreciative. So looking at the NBA playoff landscape in general here, you mentioned the Hawks as a team that a lot of people were surprised with. Is there a team for you that surprised you, either as an early exit or a team that's kind of still fighting, still playing right now past their expectations?
I mean, the Lakers are definitely a team that does that, but you know why? Obviously, with injuries throughout the course of the very short NBA season, or at least short recovery time, because there were 72 games played. And I think if the Lakers were healthy, we'd be talking them defending their crown. So you have that. To be honest with you, I am elated, but also surprised. I don't know if more elated than surprised, or more surprised than elated that the Clippers did the damage that they did against the Utah Jazz the other night. But I think you really should be surprised because they had the personnel on the floor, as I talked about that experiment, the two-year experiment. In year two for the Clippers, they're doing what they're supposed to do. I'm more surprised that, people can't figure out whether or not Kawhi tore his ACL or it's a sprain or whatever it is. But, and that's in the case of Kawhi Leonard. But I'll say this, one thing that gets lost in translation, particularly for Paul George in the last game, was that he had 16 rebounds, and 13 of those rebounds were defensive rebounds. He also recorded 2 steals, also had a block, and it was the supporting cast. Terrence Mann came up big in the starting lineup. Everybody pays attention to the dunk that he had on the Eiffel Tower. That is Rudy Gobert. They said it takes 15 minutes to get up all the way to the top of the Eiffel Tower. Homeboy got up on top of the NBA Eiffel Tower in about 2.5 seconds, and he finished with 13 points in that game. But I'll say this, it's the combination of, in order for the Clippers to finish what my late grandmother always said when it comes to relationships, you got to finish. She's from the South. Finish what you started. And, when you look at this series, okay, you took care of business then, but don't be that guy to just not to get your people's hopes up. Don't shake up the soda and then expect it to just be a small fizzle. Nah, man, that's going to explode. So you got to finish what you started. And, the combination of Marcus Morris Sr., the combination of Patrick Beverley, the combination of Bobby Schmurder's twin, Reggie Jackson, has to kind of come alive. And, Reggie Jackson came up big and did what he needed to do.
Scoopy, I want to ask you another question just about the landscape of the NBA playoffs right now. Obviously this was the first season, and who knows, maybe the last of this play-in tournament that started these playoffs, if you will. And it seemed to me that was in a real effort to get more teams that were, lower in the totem pole of the standings, to get them involved in the playoffs and maybe see someone make a deep, surprising run. And now here we are, coming into the second round. The only team that was not a top 4 seed is the Atlanta Hawks. It's all been the top seeds to this point. First off, how did you feel about the play-in tournament? Let's get that first. And then also, how do you feel about the NBA's efforts to try and expand these playoffs and their execution of doing so in this season?
I was trying to fit a Bobby Schmurder reference in there and say something like it was all good about a year ago before there was a play-in tournament. But I'll say that, I wasn't a fan of the play-in tournament at first. It was particularly because it was introduced to us in the bubble. And, when we saw it, you saw in the end, it was really the Memphis Grizzlies and the Portland Trailblazers going toe-to-toe. And when you look at that last season, and how it got to that point was the Blazers were struggling at the beginning of the season. They brought in Carmelo Anthony, and it took some time for them to kind of get him into the groove. And, you had Damian Lillard, who was hurt. You had CJ McCollum during stretches that was hurt. And then about a year later, Terry Stotts was let go as head coach. So when you look at that situation, I thought Memphis was more deserving and shouldn't have had to really compete because they were consistent. Like, as much as people talk about Zion Williamson, like RJ Barrett and John Morant made it to the playoffs, or at least the bubble before Zion Williamson did. And, that's why you see coaching changes in real time in New Orleans. But specifically to your question, this year's play-in tournament impressed me more because the Warriors and the Lakers really felt like a deep playoff run. And I actually think that the Lakers ran out of gas by the time they were done with that play-in tournament just to be Steph. But, I think the one thing that I like about this year's playoff is that this reminds me, it's reminiscent of 2019 because in 2019, LeBron and Steph weren't in the Steph was, but LeBron wasn't in the finals then. And it's there is more out there than just LeBron. Like I like LeBron. LeBron is actually is my favorite basketball player at this point. I enjoy watching him play, but I think there's going to come a point where LeBron is no longer in the NBA, where he's going to retire at some point, just based off of age. Nothing I've heard, but we better start getting used to that. So I just feel like it gives people a college basketball feel. I think that over the last 10 years, there were points where we just knew that it was going to end up being Golden State and Cleveland in the finals. And looking at the year 2021, where we are currently, like, we really don't know who's going to be in it. Like, people thought it was going to be Lakers, Nets. A great consolation prize would be Nets, Clippers. But surprisingly, if another team makes it, I don't think that there'll be so much far cry with that. Like, imagine a world where the Bucks, who many thought would go to the finals a couple years ago, actually did make it this year. Imagine a world where, the Utah Jazz avenged 97 and 98 when Jordan was their daddy, and potentially won, a trophy for the city of Salt Lake City. So, I think it's not a foregone conclusion that it's Clippers Nets, but I think that this play-in tournament gives people a chance to notice young stars that maybe folks didn't pay attention to, like the Ja Morants of the future, the Jamal Murrays of the future. And I think that the bubble helped usher that in as well, where we are currently.
This is one-on-one. Brandon Scoop B. Robinson with us here, NBA analyst, Bally Sports. So looking at here, you mentioned Kawhi Leonard, of course, on the Clippers, obviously hurt right now. A lot of injuries. It's been kind of the theme so far, the playoffs between, we also mentioned James Harden, Chris Paul, in COVID protocols right now, obviously not injured, but, Kyrie Irving as well. There's been plenty of remarks around that being, this is a reason of the short turnaround from the bubble to the start of this current season, a very short off season as it was. Do you think that's the reason why we're seeing so many injuries here come playoff time?
It's possible. I'm no doctor, but what I'll tell you is, my NBA broadcasting / writing career began during the 97-98 season when I was 12 with the Nets when they were in New Jersey. And what I'll tell you is I remember I was around the first lockout back during the 99-2000 season. And I remember, even as a 12 or 13-year-old kid, 4 games or 5 games sometime in 7 nights, where you might start playing a road game. Say you're the Knicks. If you played a home game at Madison Square Garden on a Monday, you may end up in Portland by Sunday, which means in between there, you might have played again. Like Monday, you might have played at the Garden. Tuesday, you could have played in Seattle. Wednesday, you could have been in LA. Thursday, maybe you had off. Friday, you're in San Antonio, Texas, and then Saturday and Sunday, you're anywhere between Seattle and Utah. And I feel like it's very similar now. And I've spoken to players that were playing during that era in the 90s and early 2000s that have said that, in conversations they've had with current players and just their observations, either in front office roles or, as analysts on television networks, it's reminiscent of that time. The difference is the NBA season then was maybe like 50 or 60 games versus now it's like 72 games, a lot more internet, a lot more regional coverage, and a lot more national games. And I think that when you look at this season, people don't take into account, you play one night, you fly somewhere the next game, the air pressure in airplanes, the getting to the next city at midnight and then waking up at like 7, 8 o'clock to go to shoot around to be there by 10:30 to, you play a game later that night to media obligations. If a 7:30 Eastern time game is being played, you're done on the court by 10:30. You're not leaving the arena until almost midnight. And then you got to start that process over and over the next day on a day where sometimes maybe a team is playing one night, they can stay over that night and then leave in the afternoon the next day and go about their day. There's a lot of different things that were different this year that took place before the pandemic last year and even the season before that. And so I think just routine, you're used to a certain routine. You're used to not, getting your nose with swabs stuck in your nose every day to, a point where you were in Orlando for a long period of time and you didn't see your families. Like, it's just so much basketball and so much politics and the business of basketball that has happened since the bubble. And I think that this summer will be the first slight chance of normalcy that you'll have because the regular season starts in October. But I think routine has been the difference maker as to why so much injuries have happened. And I also think some guys are playing for their next contract, so they're going extra hard. I also do think personally that a lot of guys have lack of calcium in their diets. And I think sometimes that these sports drinks make your bones brittle. And I think sometimes certain players are more top heavy than they are bottom heavy, meaning their upper bodies are great. And then their legs are chicken legs. And I think that I think all that cutting and moving and the style of play is, fast break, neck speed basketball. And it's just a lot to compact in 72 games that began in December in the regular season and ended in April, May, and, it's just a lot. I don't want to ramble, but there's a lot going on at play.
This actually transitioned quite nicely into something I really wanted to ask you about that had nothing to do with what we were discussing earlier. I've found earlier, I was going through some of your stuff and I found you'd written for Respect Magazine, and you had done a lot of work regarding the connection between sports and entertainment and the creation of a celebrity and the idea of a celebrity and that relation that has to sports and the connection of entertainment, even politics in some way. I want to ask you, so how does an athlete become a celebrity, and also what role do we in the media play in creating that?
Well, to me, a celebrity is someone who's celebrated for what they do in their respective field. I think that it's funny you mentioned that. When I was in grad school at Hofstra University, my grad thesis project was actually on celebrity and the changing nature of sports journalism. And one of the people that I sat down with during that process was Sasha Vujacic, who at the time was dating Maria Sharapova, the tennis star. And Maria Sharapova blurs that line as a celebrity as well as an athlete because of her looks and because of tennis just being a lot more highbrow from my guesstimation. And I think that Sasha had the look because he was on a multi-championship winning Lakers team playing alongside the late Kobe Bryant. Lamar Odom, who was attached to a Kardashian. That's a whole different dichotomy. That's a horse of a different color, as my geometry teacher in high school would say. I think that when you look at the celebrity and the changing nature of sports journalism, I think that number one, you playing a sport makes you a celebrity. Who you're attached to makes you a celebrity, but also social media, your following, and just the overall landscape of all that comes with being who you are, the fashion, the blogs picking you up for what you say and do and more makes you that. But I also think that guys like Zion Williamson and LaMelo Ball are for this next generation of ball player what Carmelo Anthony and LeBron James were for the 2000s, the early 2000s. Like they carried that torch, because when you look at, LaMelo Ball and Zion Williamson specifically, I mean, their AAU games were standing room only. They had the following before they stepped foot either in a college classroom or overseas off the plane. And I feel like, LaMelo Ball picked up where Brandon Jennings was supposed to go when he came back from Italy and played in the NBA. LaMelo took it to the next level, whether it was sneaker endorsements, whether it was, winning the NBA's Rookie of the Year award, to, just all of his following that comes with him playing for the Hornets, where you got people overseas paying attention to just the Hornets because he played over there. And that goes back to the whole, notion that, even the Balls, some folks consider them the Kardashians of the NBA in that regard. I'm still kind of digesting that, because when you look at the Kardashians were famous for the sake of being famous, versus the Balls. They created a buzz, they created their own brand, they created a sneaker, their father's loud, but so did the Kardashians as it relates to creating their own brands. I think everybody's a brand. And when you look back at Michael Jordan, he set the distinction between his Jordan sneaker and the Jordan brand, where you hand selected the Derek Jeters, the Roy Jones Juniors, the Ray Allens, the Eddie Joneses, Vin Bakers, and I can go on and on. Zion Williamson is the next generation of that Jordan brand ambassador. So I think when you talk about brands, money, politics, and more, this is what you get in the year 2021. But I think when it comes to politics, I think where we are as a society, COVID, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and more. I think in the 90s, Michael Jordan and many other athletes, were kind of stifled or shied away from speaking about politics because they were making so much money, which was, a reverse from the Bill Russells, the Kareem Abdul-Jabbars, the Muhammad Ali's, who were very socially conscious and making a lot less money. I think now companies and brands have had to accept that these athletes are going to speak up. And I think a lot of these athletes are unafraid. You look at Kyrie Irving, who, many people criticize, he's unafraid to be unapologetically him, pro-Black, and also pro-Islamic. I think there's a lot to dissect there, but I think that that's what today's athlete is.
With Brandon Robinson here, one-on-one, shifting to the front office with the Celtics, who have been active now, trading Kemba Walker to the Thunder. They got Al Horford, draft picks exchanged between them as well. I just wanted to get your thoughts on, do you like this trade from both the Thunder perspective and the Celtics perspective? What are you thinking about this trade?
I called Brad Stevens yesterday. Now I see why he didn't answer his phone.
He was busy.
What I'll say to you is, it seems to me that there are some salary dumps if they keep him. I think it's a good move, specifically because they need some older leadership to a young team. They had that last season with Chris Paul. I think that to pair Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, again, if Kemba stays with Kemba, I think it's a good move, particularly because New Orleans seems to be a rehabilitation place for stars to shine. And you saw what Chris Paul did in Oklahoma and what he did this year in Phoenix. And so, you look at Kemba's knee. Kemba's knee has been an issue since the beginning of this season. He really didn't want to be there. And I think that when you look at Al Horford got what he wanted when he signed with the 76ers and then they moved into Oklahoma. He fell in love with the Boston Celtics franchise. I'll tell you that, when Philadelphia signed Al Horford, it was as a way to cover the loss of Jimmy Butler in free agency to the Miami Heat. And, it didn't work out. They had to beg teams to take him, and Oklahoma was the best destination. And in moving him, they ultimately, in the Sixers, got Danny Green. So when you look at just Boston and what they're doing, it's great for the fans. I think that if Al Horford stays, he's a guy that did get along with, Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum and more. But it seems like Boston is number one, trying to retain Evan Fournier to a longer term deal. Good defender. But also they're not finished. There are some teams that are going to be looking to will and deal. And I think that when you look at the Boston Celtics, how many people thought that it was a foregone conclusion that Victor Oladipo could become a Celtic. They could be creating some cap space to bring in, the likes of a Damian Lillard, or there's just endless possibilities. The other thing is this: the fact that Brad Stevens is willing and dealing and getting his name out there as a front office guy, he is reestablishing faith with 29 other teams that the Celtics are players in the trading game, because a lot of teams did not trust Danny Ainge. And I still do think that Brad Stevens is advising, I still believe Danny Ainge is advising Brad Stevens. It's his first trade in that front office role. But it just gives a new look to the Celtics and what they're trying to accomplish.
I've got just another one kind of following up on that, I guess, staying in, I guess, off-season moves here for some of the teams as the playoffs are still going on, of course. But the Mavericks also, of course, with Donnie Nelson being gone and Rick Carlisle being gone, back-to-back days there kind of. And then my question with that is, first of all, what are you thinking about potential replacements for those kind of guys? And then also, does this kind of threaten Doncic and his supermax over the summer that he's expected to sign?
No, it won't affect his supermax. I think it makes him comfortable to sign it, actually. I spoke with Mark Cuban earlier this week on the phone, and he intimated to me that he and Luka are close as he and Dirk Nowitzki was when he played, and you saw that the Dallas Mavericks hired Dirk in a advisory role. And to specifically answer your question, $215 million, 4 or 5 years on that deal is something that, that the Mavericks and Luka will probably sign this summer. But they still need some work. More specifically, you look at Rick Carlisle and his relationship with Dennis Smith Jr. Dennis Smith Jr. was ultimately traded to the New York Knicks. I'd like to see that the Mavericks, in good faith, try to maybe bring him back. But also, they need a dominant point guard. They need and I'm saying not him specifically, but they need a Chris Paul type guard alongside Luka Doncic. And most perimeter guys, or most hybrid forwards like Luka, who can, when you look at hybrid forwards, you look at guys like LeBron James, you look at Ben Simmons, you look at Julius Randle, you look at Luka in that vein. They need a point guard in that system to kind of offset what they can do. And you saw it in Miami with LeBron in their second year together after they lost the championship in 2011 to the Dallas Mavericks. You saw that LeBron kind of shifted off the ball some and played a natural small forward position, which was out of his comfort zone at first, where he was ball dominant and played point guard for so many years. So I think as Luka gets more and more into his career and starts cementing things, you wonder if they're going to kind of bring, a point guard, a pure point guard in to kind of offset what he's doing. I look at the Dallas Mavericks and I look at Kristaps Porzingis personally. I feel like he'd be such a great fit with the Chicago Bulls. But I'll add, if you're looking for a dominant point guard, I feel as though Lonzo Ball fits that box, but you'd be spending about $20 million a year. That I know Mark Cuban has the money. If you pay the luxury tax to get that done, you might be onto something. But I think Lonzo Ball would check boxes with Dallas in that position, because he can play both guard spots, just like Drew Holiday has been able to do, and he can defend both the point guard and the two guard position for Dallas. So. I'll just say that I think that moving forward, Luka has to question the direction of the Mavs. Getting rid of Don Nelson signals that the Mavs are hearing him. And I think Michael Finley, if you keep it in-house and relationship-wise, would check boxes as far as front office. In the same way that I think, you look at the New York Knicks, Allen Houston checks boxes as far as just, being part of that Knicks culture and being brought in to kind of assist and just, being the next phase of young folks who will be in front office positions. So we'll see what happens, but I do like Michael Finley in that front office position with the Mavs.
NBA analyst at Bally Sports, Brandon Scoopy Robinson, thank you so much for being with you today. I had a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks, Scoopy.
Guys, thank you for the opportunity to be myself.
Appreciate that. This is One-on-One. We will return after a short break. New York's longest running sports call-in show. Stick around.